Hello, my dear listeners. I'm Abigail, and I'm here with you tonight to dive into a tale woven from the myths of old, where gods and mortals collide, where fate is written in the stars, and where legends are born in the whispers of the wind. Tonight, I bring you a story of a power, betrayal, and redemption. A story that has been passed down through the ages, waiting to be heard once more. So close your eyes, let the world around you fade, and allow yourself to be transported to the realm of the gods, where Olympus stands tall and destinies are forged in fire and shadow. And if you love stories like this, be sure to follow and join me for the next magical tale. There's always another legend waiting to be told. Now, let the story begin. The halls of Olympus had never known silence. Not in all the ages since the gods first carved their thrones from the bones of the Titans. Yet now the air was still. It was an unnatural stillness, thick with unease, as though the sky itself had forgotten how to breathe. Hera sat alone upon the great golden throne at the head of the celestial hall, her fingers tightening around the polished arms of her seat. The throne was vast, its carvings older than mortal time, each etching a memory of conquest and rule. Once, this seat had been her domain, the place from which she guided Olympus with an iron will and unshaken certainty. Now, she sat not as a queen, but as a prisoner. The absence of Zeus was a weight upon her, not because she missed him, but because the throne beside her, his throne, stood empty. The greatest deception of all was that the gods still believed he ruled Olympus. They still felt his power in the storms that rolled across the earth, in the flicker of lightning that split the heavens. But Hera knew the truth. She had known it from the moment she had awakened in chains. She closed her eyes and thought back to the moment it had all begun. It was not a grand battle, nor a cataclysmic war of the gods that had unseated Zeus. It was betrayal, a betrayal woven with such delicate precision that even Hera, the goddess of cunning, had not seen it coming. The night had been thick with the scent of ambrosia and myrrh. The gods had gathered in the grand hall, feasting as they had done for centuries. Hera had sat in her place of honor, regal and unyielding, her golden crown catching the divine light. But then came the whispers, then came the poison. She had raised her cup, as had they all, but the wine had burned upon her tongue. A moment later, her vision had blurred. The faces of the gods had twisted and swayed, their laughter becoming a distant echo. The last thing she had seen before darkness took her was the smirk upon Aphrodite's lips, the sly glance exchanged between Hermes and Athena. And then nothing. When she had awakened, it was to the cold embrace of chains wrapped around her wrists, her ankles. The scent of sea salt and damp stone filled her nostrils, and she knew immediately where she was. Tartarus. She had raged. She had called upon the heavens to strike down the traitors, had screamed until her voice was raw. But the underworld did not listen. The chains that bound her were crafted from the bones of the ancient Titans, the very ons she and Zeus had once imprisoned. She was trapped, her power stripped from her, her throne stolen, while the gods above carried on as if nothing had changed. When they came for her, she was no longer the queen she had been. Time in the darkness had stripped her of her golden robes, of her jeweled crown. She was weaker than she had ever been. Her divine radiance dimmed, but her fury had not waned. It was Hermes who approached her first, his winged sandals barely making a sound against the cold floor. Behind him stood Athena, her gray eyes sharp with judgment, and Poseidon, his trident resting against his shoulder like a weapon waiting to strike. "Hera, queen of Olympus," Hermes announced, his voice smooth and practiced. "You are to stand trial." She let out a laugh, low and bitter. "Trial? Have you come to mock me, little messenger?" Hermes did not falter. "You've been accused of treason against Olympus." At that, Hera's blood turned to ice. "Treason." She lifted her gaze, meeting Athena's unblinking stare. "This is his doing, isn't it? Zeus has?" "Zeus is gone," Athena interrupted coldly, "and we do not know where." The weight of those words settled deep in Hera's bones. Gone. That was impossible. Zeus did not simply disappear. He was the sky, the storm, the ruler of all. If he was missing, then something greater was at play. Poseidon stepped forward, his voice thick with the sea's rumble. With Zeus missing, Olympus cannot stand without a ruler. The gods must act, and the council has spoken. You are to be judged Hera. "And who sits upon my throne while I rot in chains?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Athena's lips pressed into a thin line. "Apollo." Hera exhaled sharply. The golden god of prophecy, and the sun, ever ambitious, ever eager to claim more power. She should have seen it coming. "I did nothing," she said, her voice laced with venom. "Whatever has happened to Zeus, I am not responsible." Hermes tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "Then prove it." The trial of the gods was unlike any mortal judgment. It was not conducted in courts or decided by juries. The gods demanded proof, and proof in Olympus was forged in divine trials. "The council has decreed that you must complete 12 labors," Hermes declared. 12 tasks that will test your power, your cunning, and your worth. Hera's jaw clenched, and should I refuse? Poseidon's trident scraped against the ground. "Then you will remain here in the depths of Tartarus until time itself unravels." 12 labors. It was an insult, a cruel mockery of the trials once placed upon Heracles, the son of Zeus whom she had tormented for years. And now fate had turned its cruel hand upon her. But Hera was no mere mortal, no demigod struggling for a place among the heavens. She was the queen of Olympus, and she would not be caged like a forgotten beast. Lifting her chin, she met their gazes, defiant and unbowed. "Very well," she said. "I accept your challenge." Hermes nodded, satisfied. "Then let the 12 labors of Hera begin." Hera's feet barely made a sound as they touched the polished marble of Olympus. The air was thick with the scent of incense and divine energy, and though her wrists no longer bore chains, the weight of unseen shackles remained. The gods who had betrayed her stood gathered in a semicircle before the grand throne of Apollo, their eyes unreadable. They had condemned her, stripped her of her power, and cast her into the depths of Tartarus. And yet, now, they watched with something almost resembling hesitation. She would not give them the satisfaction of weakness. Straightening her shoulders, she took her place before the council. Hermes was the first to speak, his golden staff glinting under the ethereal light of Olympus. "The first of your 12 labors has been decided," he declared, his voice smooth as ever. "You are to descend to the mortal realm and retrieve the golden stag of Artemis." A ripple of whispers passed through the assembly. Hera did not miss the flicker of amusement in Athena's gaze, or the way Aphrodite turned her head slightly, as if barely suppressing a smile. They all believed she would fail, that she, queen of Olympus, ruler of the heavens, would be bested by a mere beast. Fools. "I accept," she said, her voice even, betraying none of the fury that burned beneath her skin. The mortal world was a cacophony of sounds, of life surging forward without knowledge of the divine games being played above. Hera stood at the edge of a dense forest, her feet sinking slightly into the rich soil. The whispers of the gods still echoed in her ears, but here, among the towering trees and the scent of fresh earth, Olympus felt like a distant nightmare. Finding the stag would not be easy. It was no ordinary creature, but one blessed by Artemis herself, golden-horned, swift as the wind, and untouchable by mortal hands. The hunt would test not only her skill, but her patience. She had neither the time nor the luxury to fail. She moved through the forest with practiced ease, her steps light, her senses attuned to every shift in the leaves. The mortals here spoke of the stag in hushed tones, of glimpses caught at the edge of twilight, of the godly presence they could not name. She listened to their stories, piecing together its path, until finally, deep within the heart of the woods, she saw it. It stood poised, regal and untamed, its golden antlers catching the light of the setting sun. For a moment it regarded her unafraid, as if it knew she was no mere mortal hunter. Hera met its gaze, and in that moment she understood. This was no simple trial. It was a test of her will, of her ability to outwit even the divine. With a steady breath, she stepped forward. The stag bolted. She was ready. For days she chased it, through valleys and across rivers, through storms and over mountains. It never tired, never faltered, and yet she did not give up. She wove through the dense forests, never losing sight of her prey, never allowing it to fully escape her grasp. The gods above watched, some with mocking laughter, others with wary interest, but she ignored them all. She was Hera, and she would not fail. On the 5th night, beneath a sky heavy with stars, she found it again. This time, she did not run. This time, she spoke. "You are a creature of Artemis, bound by the wilds," she murmured, her voice carrying through the hush of the night. "And yet even you must recognize the weight of my command." The stag hesitated, its ears flicking forward. Hera took a slow step closer, her presence commanding yet calm. She did not need force. She needed understanding. "I am no longer the queen I once was," she continued, "but that does not mean I have lost my power." The stag lowered its head slightly, golden eyes studying her. Then, in a movement so sudden it barely registered, it knelt. Hera exhaled, placing a hand upon its gleaming coat. The air crackled with energy, as if Olympus itself had felt the shift. The hunt was over. The first labor was complete. She returned to Olympus with her head high, the golden stag following obediently at her side. Silence met her arrival, the gathered gods watching with something she almost wished to call respect. Even Apollo, seated upon the throne that was not his, regarded her with quiet contemplation. Hermes stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "The first labor has been completed," he announced. Hera smiled, slow and victorious. "And the second?" The gods hesitated, as if realizing for the first time that perhaps they had underestimated her. Good, good, for she had no intention of stopping now. Hera stood at the threshold of Olympus, the weight of her first victory still fresh in her mind. The golden stag had been proof of her cunning, of her ability to outmaneuver even Artemis's sacred beast. But she knew the gods were not so easily impressed. They had hoped for her failure, expected her to falter, yet here she was, standing tall, defiant and ready for the next trial. The gathered gods whispered among themselves, their voices a mixture of disbelief and intrigue. Hera caught glimpses of Athena's calculating stare, Poseidon's barely concealed smirk, and Aphrodite's knowing smile. They were watching her, waiting to see if her strength would endure. Apollo, seated upon the throne that was never meant for him, tapped his fingers against the gilded armrest. He did not speak immediately, letting the weight of silence press down upon the hall. Then, finally, he leaned forward. "Your second labor has been decided," he declared, his golden eyes locking onto hers. "You are to retrieve the chalice of Nyx." A murmur spread through the gods. Even Hermes, who had thus far remained impassive, raised a brow. Hera's fingers curled slightly. The chalice of Nyx was no mere artifact. It was an object of deep, primordial power, forged in the black void of the night itself. It was said to hold the essence of dreams and shadows. To retrieve it was not just an act of endurance. It was a descent into the unknown. "And where does the chalice lie?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Athena's voice was calm, unreadable, in the depths of Erebus, a place where no god willingly ventured, a realm of endless night where even the stars feared to shine. Hera knew the dangers. the whispers of forgotten deities, the creatures that lurked in the abyss, and the very nature of the chalice itself. It was a challenge meant to break her. She would not let it. Without another word, she turned and left the hall, her path clear. The entrance to Erebus lay far beyond the realms of mortals and gods, nestled deep within the folds of the underworld. It was a place untouched by time, where the rivers of the dead did not flow, and the light of Olympus dared not reach. Hera stepped forward, the threshold looming before her like an open maw. The air was thick, heavy with an unnatural silence. She exhaled, steadying herself, and stepped into the abyss. Darkness enveloped her instantly, thick as ink, suffocating and unyielding. It pressed against her skin, whispering of forgotten things, of voices lost to the void, but she did not waver. She moved forward, her steps steady, her senses sharp. The chalice of Nyx was hidden deep within this realm, guarded by those who thrived in the absence of light. A flicker of movement caught her attention. She turned just in time to see a shadow shift, unnatural and fluid. A figure emerged, its form neither solid nor entirely formless. It had no face, yet she could feel its gaze upon her. "A queen walks where she does not belong," the voice rasped, ancient and hollow. "Why have you come?" Hera straightened. "I seek the chalice of Nyx." Laughter, dry as brittle parchment, echoed around her. More figures emerged, slipping through the darkness like specters. "Many seek it, none return." She did not flinch. "I am not many." Silence followed. Then one of the figures extended a hand, its fingers long and sharp as obsidian. "Then prove it." The ground beneath her shifted, and suddenly she was falling. She landed in a chamber of endless black, the very walls pulsing with shadow. Before her, on a pedestal of polished onyx, sat the chalice of Nyx. It was a vessel of impossible depth, the night itself swirling within. She took a step forward, but the moment she did, the shadows around her moved. From the darkness, creatures began to take shape, nightmares given form, monstrosities that should not exist outside of dreams. One lunged. Hera dodged, her movements swift, precise. Another followed, its clawed hands reaching for her, but she was faster. She did not fight them as a warrior would. She fought as a goddess. Every step was calculated, every movement precise. These creatures were born of fear, but she was Hera. She knew how to command fear itself. She reached the pedestal, her fingers grazing the chalice. A final creature rose, larger than the rest, its form shifting and twisting, eyes burning like dying stars. It spoke, its voice the echo of countless forgotten souls. To take the chalice is to claim the night. Are you prepared to bear its weight? Hera met its gaze, unwavering. "I am." The creature let out a sound that might have been laughter. Then it stepped back and the shadows stilled. She lifted the chalice. The moment her fingers closed around it, the darkness surged, wrapping around her like a cloak. But she did not resist. She embraced it, allowing the night to weave into her being. When the abyss finally released her, she stood once more at the threshold of Erebus, the chalice in her grasp. Olympus awaited her return. The great hall was silent when she entered. She strode forward, the chalice of Nyx gleaming in her hands. The gods watched, their expressions unreadable. Hermes finally spoke. The second labor is complete. She met Apollo's gaze, her lips curving into a knowing smile. And the third? For the first time, Apollo hesitated. Good. She was just getting started. Hera had barely stepped off Olympus's shining steps before the air around her shifted. A whisper of power, ancient and absolute, curled through the space around her, unseen hands pressing against her skin. The gods were watching. More than ever before, they were waiting to see if she would falter. She would not. The chalice of Nyx had granted her a taste of the void, an understanding of what it meant to wield the night itself. But now a new challenge loomed, one that would test her in a way she had not yet faced. She did not need Hermes to announce her third trial. The moment she crossed the threshold of Olympus, a presence stirred within her mind. Not a voice, not a whisper, but a weight, something ancient and waiting. She turned toward the sea. The gods had chosen well. The next labor would take her into the depths of the ocean, into Poseidon's domain, where even the immortals hesitated to tread. The temple of Tethys lay at the farthest edge of the known seas, hidden beneath waters so deep that no mortal had ever glimpsed its spires and lived to tell of it. It was a relic of the world before the Olympians, a place that even the gods had long abandoned, save for one secret. Within its walls lay the pearl of the deep, a fragment of divine power gifted by Tethys herself, lost to the abyss. Hera stood at the edge of the cliffs overlooking the churning ocean, the scent of salt thick in the air. Below, the waters roiled, not with natural force, but with something deeper, something watching. Poseidon's power pulsed through every wave. So you would come to steal from me, a voice rumbled, rolling over the waters like thunder. Hera did not turn. She had expected him. Steal? She echoed, her tone laced with defiance. It was never yours to begin with. From the depths, a form rose. Poseidon, trident in hand, his sea-green eyes dark with warning. Water dripped from his beard, from the golden band around his brow. But the weight of his presence was what truly made the sea itself seem to hesitate. And yet it rests within my domain, he countered. Do you think I will simply allow you to take it? Hera met his gaze without flinching. I think you have no choice. A dangerous smile flickered across his lips. Then prove it. The sea swallowed her whole. She did not fight it. She let the currents twist around her, let the abyss pull her downward. She had no need to breathe, not in the way mortals did, but still the pressure threatened to crush her. the weight of a world hidden beneath the waves pressing into her bones. Shapes moved in darkness. Serpentine bodies, glowing eyes, things that had never seen the sun but had existed long before Olympus was born. They did not attack, but they watched, sensing something foreign among them. Hera did not waver. She let her senses expand, feeling the pulse of the sea, the ebb and flow of tides that bent to Poseidon's will. He was testing her, but she had not come unprepared. Her fingers curled, and from the void left within her by the chalice of Nyx, she called forth the night. Darkness spread around her, curling through the water like ink. The creatures in the deep shrank back uncertain. Even the sea itself hesitated, Poseidon's power clashing against hers. Then ahead, she saw it, the temple. Massive, carved from stone that seemed untouched by time, its pillars wrapped in coral, its entrance yawning wide like the mouth of an ancient beast. It had been abandoned, but power still lingered within its walls. The pearl of the deep awaited her inside. The moment she crossed the threshold, the waters within the temple stilled. Hera stepped forward, her senses sharpening. The walls were lined with carvings older than even the Titans, depicting gods that had been forgotten, deities who had faded into the abyss of time. Their eyes seemed to follow her, whispering warnings in a language she did not know. At the center of the temple, upon a pedestal of obsidian, lay the pearl. It was larger than she expected, pulsing with a soft, ethereal glow, as if holding within it the very breath of the sea. She reached for it, but the moment her fingers brushed the surface, the temple awoke. The ground trembled, the water shifted, and from the shadows, something rose. A guardian. It was not a beast, not in the way mortals would recognize. It had no true form, only a shifting mass of water and light, ancient and bound to protect what had been left behind. It did not speak. It attacked. Hera barely had time to move before the force of the entity slammed into her, the water twisting, clawing, trying to consume her. She fought, not with brute strength, not with fire or force, but with command. "I am Hera," she thundered, her voice cutting through the water itself. "Queen of the heavens, you will bow." The entity shuddered. It did not submit, not entirely, but for the first time it hesitated. Hera pressed forward. "Your mistress is gone. The world has changed, but I remain." The guardian twisted, its form flickering. Then, without another sound, it dissolved, returning to the sea. She grasped the pearl. The temple stilled. She turned and left, the weight of the ocean pressing behind her as she ascended, the depths releasing her at last. Poseidon was waiting when she emerged. She stepped onto the cliffs, the pearl still glowing faintly in her grasp, and met his gaze with quiet triumph. He studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, with a breath like the shifting tides, he inclined his head. "You have earned it." She did not thank him. She simply turned, the pearl clutched in her palm and walked away. The third labor was complete, and Olympus was watching. Hera did not pause as she ascended the gleaming steps of Olympus, the pearl of the deep still cool in her palm. Each labor had tested her resolve, had stripped away the certainty of the life she had once ruled, but she did not break. She would not break. She had reclaimed her place among the gods, even if they did not yet acknowledge it. The moment she entered the great hall, the gathered deities turned their eyes upon her. Apollo sat upon the throne that was not his golden gaze unreadable. Athena stood rigid, hands folded before her, ever the strategist calculating her next move. Hermes, ever watchful, offered her a small smirk, while Poseidon's presence carried the weight of the deep. She let the silence stretch before finally raising the pearl. The third labor's done. The words rang through the chamber like a declaration of war. Apollo leaned forward, resting his chin upon his hand. So it is. She could feel their unease. They had expected her failure, had hoped she would drown beneath the weight of the ocean, but she had emerged stronger. The fire in her veins burned ever hotter. Hermes, perhaps sensing the tension, cleared his throat. The council has chosen your next trial. Hera tilted her head, meeting his gaze directly. Then speak it. Athena stepped forward, her voice calm and measured. You are to retrieve the flame of Prometheus. A murmur passed through the gathered gods. Even Apollo seemed to tense slightly at the mention of the Titan's name. The flame of Prometheus was not an object of mere power. It was knowledge stolen from the heavens and given to mortals. It was fire and defiance, a force that had defied Zeus himself. Hera's lips pressed into a thin line. Where is it? Poseidon let out a quiet chuckle. Where else? The Titan himself guards it. The prison of Prometheus lay far beyond the mortal realms, at the very edge of existence, high in the jagged peaks of the Caucasus, where storms reigned eternal and the air was thick with Zeus's lingering wrath. The Titan remained chained. He had been bound for eternity, condemned for the crime of giving fire to mankind. But he was no broken prisoner. No, Prometheus was something far worse, a being with nothing left to lose. Hera's journey to the mountain was fraught with peril. The path was treacherous, the wind howling through the valleys like a chorus of vengeful spirits. Yet she did not waver. She was not a mortal seeking favor, nor a hero chasing immortality. She was a queen reclaiming what was hers. When she reached the peak, the sky split open with thunder, and before her, bound to a great rock, was Prometheus. His form was gaunt, his body bearing the marks of endless torment. Chains of celestial iron wrapped around his limbs, binding him to the stone, unyielding and unbreakable. Yet his eyes, those dark, ancient eyes, still burned with defiance. Queen of Olympus, he murmured, voice raw from ages of suffering, to what do I owe this pleasure? Hera did not waste time with pleasantries. I have come for the flame. Prometheus laughed, a sound that was almost cruel, And you believe I will give it to you? She stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. You defied Zeus once, Titan. You stole fire for mankind, knowing the cost. You suffered his wrath for it. I am not Zeus, but I have known his chains. I have known his drains. I have known his cruelty. Do not mistake me for one who follows blindly. Prometheus studied her for a long moment. The wind howled around them, the storm pressing close, as if Olympus itself sought to drown out their words. Then, slowly, he exhaled. Very well. If you seek the flame, then you must take it. But beware, Queen of the heavens, fire is not given. It is earned. With a flick of his hand, the mountain rumbled beneath them, and from the heart of the rock, a great inferno roared to life. The flame of Prometheus was unlike any fire she had ever seen. It was not merely heat, it was knowledge, rebellion, and raw, unbridled power. Hera stepped forward, feeling its warmth dance against her skin. It called to her, whispering of all that could be, all that had been lost. But as she reached for it, the fire twisted, forming into a figure of pure flame, a guardian born of the very essence of defiance. The fire, being lunged. Hera did not retreat. She met its attack head on, summoning the power of the night within her. Shadows coiled around her, clashing against the fire, but the guardian was relentless. It struck again and again, each blow searing, each strike filled with the rage of a force that had been caged for too long. She could not overpower it. Fire was not a force that could be subdued. It had to be understood. Drawing upon the knowledge left by the chalice of Nyx, she let go of control. She let the fire burn through her, let it become part of her. She felt its pain, its longing, its hunger. And in that moment, she did not fight it. She embraced it. The fire swirled around her, no longer striking, no longer resisting. Instead, it merged with her, seeping into her veins, into her very being. The guardian did not vanish. It became her. When she opened her eyes, the flame of Prometheus rested in her palm. Prometheus watched her, something akin to respect flickering in his gaze. Perhaps you are not as blind as I thought. Hera clenched her fingers around the fire, feeling its power pulse through her. No, I am not. She turned, the flame now hers, and descended the mountain. The fourth labor was complete, and the heavens trembled. Hera descended from the peak of the Caucasus, the flame of Prometheus still burning in her grasp. It was unlike any fire she had ever wielded. It did not merely provide warmth or destruction. It whispered. The knowledge within it was ancient, stretching back to the first flicker of light in the void, and it pulsed within her veins as if it had been waiting for her. She had not returned to Olympus immediately after her victory. Instead, she walked among the mortal world, unseen, stepping through villages, past temples built in Zeus's name, past shrines where her likeness had been reduced to an afterthought, a goddess invoked only by those seeking vengeance or favor in their marriages. It was a reminder of what had been taken from her, of the power she had once commanded before Olympus had turned against her. The gods believed her trials were meant to break her, but each labor only reforged her into something new. She reached the outskirts of a ruined temple at dusk, standing before the crumbling columns. Here, long ago, she had been worshipped as the true queen of the gods, not merely the scorned wife of Zeus. Here, sacrifices had been made in her honor, not out of fear, but of reverence. Now, all that remained were shattered altars and vines overtaking stone, a reminder that even gods could be forgotten. She let the flame flicker against the ruins, just a breath of it. A taste, and the air around her shimmered. Time trembled. For a moment, the temple was as it once had been. Oh, magnificent, filled with the scent of offerings and the sound of voices lifted in praise. For a moment, she saw what had been lost. Then the vision faded, and all that remained was the ruin. A voice cut through the silence. It is a dangerous thing to bring fire where it was once extinguished. Hera turned slowly, unsurprised to find Athena standing behind her. The goddess of wisdom had always been watchful, always waiting. She had been one of the first to cast her vote against Hera in the trial, and yet there was no mockery in her eyes now, only calculation. "Do you fear what I might do with it?" Hera asked, holding the flame aloft. Athena did not answer immediately. She stepped closer, the golden owl perched upon her shoulder shifting its wings. "I wonder if you know what you will do with it. Prometheus's fire is not just a weapon. It is change itself." Hera met her gaze, unflinching. Then perhaps Olympus should prepare for change. Athena exhaled slowly, studying her, then finally said, "Your next labor has been decided." Hera did not look away. "Tell me." "You are to retrieve the heart of the Gorgon." A silence settled between them, thick with meaning. Medusa. Even now, her name carried weight. The mortal world remembered her as a monster, cursed by Athena herself, a creature slain by the hero Perseus. But Hera knew the truth. Medusa had not been born a monster. She had been made one, and though her body had been lost, her heart still remained, hidden beyond the reach of gods and men. It was said that the heart of the Gorgon pulsed with an undying wrath, a power that could turn even Olympus itself to stone. Hera clenched her fist around the flame of Prometheus. "Where is it?" Athena's expression did not change. "You already know." The underworld. Hera's descent into the underworld was not met with resistance. Charon, the ferryman of the dead, barely spared her a glance as she stepped onto his boat. The river beneath them churned with the whispers of souls long gone, their voices grasping at her as the boat cut through the black waters. "You return too often to the land of the dead, Queen of Olympus," Charon murmured. Hera did not answer. She had no time for his riddles. When they reached the shore, she stepped into the dim glow of the underworld's twilight, where the sky was neither day nor night, where shadows moved of their own accord. The path to Medusa's resting place was not marked, but Hera did not need a guide. She could feel it. Through the winding caverns and past the silent halls of Hades' domain, she followed the pull of something ancient. The presence of the dead did not disturb her. She had seen too much, known too much to fear them. But this place was different. It was older than Olympus, untouched by time or godly rule. The chamber she sought was hidden deep within the roots of the underworld, past the gates where mortal souls dared not tread. She stepped inside, and at once the air hissed. The walls pulsed with something alive, something watching. And there, at the center of the chamber, upon a pedestal of black stone, lay the heart of the Gorgon. It was no mere relic. It was a thing of power, pulsing with a slow, steady rhythm, as though it still remembered the fury of the woman it had once belonged to. The stone's surface glowed faintly, shifting between deep green and burning gold. Hera stepped forward. The moment she did, the air around her came alive. Shadows peeled from the walls, twisting into the forms of serpents, their eyes gleaming, their bodies writhing with fury. A voice slithered through the darkness, one that did not belong to the dead, but to something that refused to die. You seek my heart, but do you understand its weight? Hera did not hesitate. I do. The shadows coiled tighter. Then prove it. The serpents lunged. Hera stood firm. She did not draw upon the flame in her hand, nor the shadows of the night she had wielded before. Instead, she called upon something greater, something that had always been hers, her wrath. The power that surged from her was not of fire or night, but of something far older. It was the storm that had raged in her heart since Olympus had betrayed her, the fury of a queen scorned, a goddess unbowed. The shadows recoiled, the serpents shrieking as they were swallowed by the force of her will. She reached forward and grasped the heart of the Gorgon. The chamber trembled. The whispers ceased. And for the first time in eons, the underworld recognized a new power. Hera turned and walked away, the heart still beating in her grasp. The fifth labor was complete, and Olympus would soon learn that the Queen of the Gods had returned. Hera did not rest upon her return to Olympus. She had no time to savor the completion of her latest labor, nor to bask in the way the gods' eyes lingered on her as she strode through the great hall, the heart of the Gorgon still pulsing with faint power in her grasp. The weight of it was unlike anything she had carried before, a relic of a woman who had been turned into a monster, of power born from pain, of vengeance that had never been fully realized. As she approached the throne where Apollo sat, he observed her carefully. The self-assurance that had once graced his features had shifted. There was something else now, something new, a sliver of doubt. He had not expected her to come this far. "The fifth labor is complete," she announced, her voice calm but unwavering. "What is the sixth?" Apollo drummed his fingers on the gilded armrest. "Your next task is the most dangerous yet, Hera. You are to enter the labyrinth of Daedalus and retrieve the eye of the storm. A murmur spread through the assembled gods. Even Athena's expression flickered, as if the name alone carried weight. Hera narrowed her eyes. "And where does this eye reside?" she asked. Poseidon leaned forward, a glint of amusement in his sea-dark gaze. "At the very heart of the labyrinth, guarded by the Minotaur reborn." The labyrinth, a place of shifting walls and endless corridors, designed by the greatest mortal mind to confound even the gods. A prison of madness and isolation where time itself became uncertain. And at its center, waiting for her, a creature that should not exist. Hera did not hesitate. "I will retrieve it." The entrance to the labyrinth lay deep within Crete, hidden beneath the ruins of a forgotten palace. Hera stood at the threshold, the ground beneath her feet worn smooth by the centuries. The wind howled through the broken pillars above, carrying the scent of sea salt and dust. Before her, a gaping entrance yawned into darkness. It was not a mere passageway, but a thing alive, pulsing with energy, the very stone shifting as if breathing. No one had entered and returned in centuries. Hera stepped forward. The moment she crossed the threshold, the walls moved. The world shifted around her, closing in, spiraling. What had been a clear path twisted upon itself, bending reality into something unnatural. The exit disappeared, swallowed by the shifting maze. There was no turning back. She moved carefully, her steps measured. The labyrinth whispered as she walked, voices threading through the walls, echoes of those who had wandered these halls before her. Some had been mortals, trapped in their king's cruel designs. Others had been gods seeking to prove their might, only to be lost to the endless corridors. Time slipped away. Hera did not know how long she walked. Minutes, hours, days. The torches lining the walls burned without flickering, their flames untouched by wind or time. Then, from the depths of the shadows, something stirred. A low guttural growl reverberated through the stone, shaking dust from the ceiling. Hera stopped, her grip tightening. The Minotaur had found her. It did not charge immediately. It watched her, its hulking form half-shadowed in the dim light. Its body was larger than she had expected, taller than any mortal man, with muscles carved from stone and sinew. Its eyes burned with something ancient, something not entirely of this world. This was no mere beast. This was rage incarnate, reborn into flesh. Hera did not retreat. She met its gaze. "You were made into a monster," she said, her voice steady, "twisted by the gods into something unnatural. But you are not without reason." The Minotaur snorted, its breath hot, curling into the air like smoke. "I have come for the eye of the storm. Let me pass." The creature roared. The force of it shook the very walls. It charged, its massive hooves cracking the ground, its horns gleaming in the firelight. Hera Atheneveved. She twisted, just barely avoiding its deadly charge. The force of its momentum sent it crashing into the wall, but the labyrinth did not break. It absorbed the impact, shifting and twisting, reshaping itself in an instant. The Minotaur turned on her again, faster than something of its size had any right to be. Hera summoned the power within her, the knowledge of Nyx's shadows, the fire of Prometheus, the weight of the Gorgon's heart. They surged within her veins, but she did not unleash them. Not yet. This battle was not one of brute force. She had to outthink the beast. The battle was not over quickly. Again and again, the Minotaur charged, its strikes precise, its rage never-ending. But Hera endured. She dodged, countered, moved through the ever-shifting walls of the labyrinth, using its own design against it. Where the Minotaur relied on strength, she relied on a foresight. And then, when the moment came, she struck. Not with power, not with weapons, but with truth. "You were never meant to be here," she whispered as the Minotaur lunged once more. "You were made into this, but you can be more." The words reached something deep within the beast. Its momentum slowed. For the first time, true awareness flickered in its gaze. The rage, the pain, both had been inflicted upon it. It was a prisoner of divine punishment. It was a prisoner of divine punishment, just as she had been. The Minotaur hesitated, and in that hesitation, the labyrinth yielded. The walls shifted, the air stilled, and in the very center of the chamber, a pedestal rose. Upon it sat the eye of the storm. Upon it sat the eye of the storm. A crystal swirling with the very force of tempests, containing the fury of 1,000 storms trapped in a single moment. Hera stepped forward. The Minotaur did not move to stop her. It only watched as she took the eye, its power thrumming against her fingers, the winds within whispering secrets of a forgotten past. The path forward opened. She turned to the Minotaur one last time. "You are not what they made you." Then she left. The labyrinth did not fight her. It let her go. The shifting corridors aligning, leading her out. When she emerged once more beneath the open sky, the first true breath of air filled her lungs. In her hands, the storm eye of the storm pulsed. The 6th labor was complete, and Olympus had no idea what was coming. Hera stood at the summit of Olympus, the eye of the storm pulsating in her grip. The winds around her whispered with divine energy, restless and untamed, carrying the murmurs of the gods who had dared doubt her. She had ventured into the labyrinth, outwitted the Minotaur reborn, and returned not only unscathed but victorious. Each labor had shaped her, reforged her, and with each step forward she felt herself shedding the old mantle of Zeus's scorned wife and reclaiming something far greater. The halls of Olympus were silent when she entered. The gods, seated in their golden thrones, watched her with expressions ranging from admiration to unease. Even Apollo, who sat upon the throne that should never have been his, did not speak immediately. He studied her with a calculating gaze, one that sought weakness but found none. Hera broke the silence. The 6th labor is complete. I am ready for the 7th. A murmur passed through the gods, a rustling of robes and shifting of seats. Hermes, ever the messenger, stepped forward, unfurling a scroll marked with divine sigils. He cleared his throat before reading. For your 7th labor, you are to retrieve the ashes of Helios from the ruins of the sun, Titan's lost temple. A hush settled over the assembly. The task was no small feat. The temple of Helios had been reduced to ruin long ago when the Titan of the sun had fallen, his essence burning away and leaving behind only embers of his former power. The ashes of Helios were said to hold the last remnants of his divine fire, untouched by time, hidden in a place where even the gods feared to tread. Poseidon scoffed from his throne. A fool's errand. The fire of Helios has long since died. What remains are echoes, shadows of a flame that once burned bright. Hera turned to him, her voice unwavering. Then I shall walk among the echoes and claim what is mine. Apollo finally spoke, his golden gaze unblinking. Then go, Queen of Olympus. Find what remains of the Titan's fire, if it still exists. The ruins of Helios' temple lay in the forgotten lands beyond the western edge of the world, where the sun once set in brilliant flames before sinking into the abyss of night. Hera traveled through lands scorched by forgotten battles, across deserts where the sand itself shimmered with the remnants of Titan's power. The mortals here spoke of the ruins in hushed tones, fearing the wrath of something that should have long since faded. When she arrived at the temple, she found it as the stories had foretold. Broken columns, half. Buried in the sand, shattered statues depicting the sun Titan in his former glory, and an eerie silence that did not belong to a place once filled with divine radiance. She stepped into the heart of the temple, where the sun had once burned brightest. The air was thick with the scent of ash, and the ground beneath her feet radiated a warmth that should not have remained after so many centuries. Then a voice, dry as crackling embers, whispered from the shadows, "You seek what is gone." Hera turned sharply, her fingers tightening around the eye of the storm. The figure before her was not a god, nor a mortal. It was something in between, something trapped in the liminality of existence. "Who speaks?" she demanded. The figure stepped forward, and in the dim light, she saw what remained of the last priest of Helios. His robes, once golden, were now charred remnants, his skin like scorched parchment stretched too thin over bones. Yet his eyes still burned with the remnants of the sun's fury. "I am the last keeper of Helios' flame," he rasped, "and you have come too late. The fire has dimmed. The ashes you seek cannot be claimed." Hera did not waver. The gods may have abandoned this place, but power never truly dies. Helios' fire may have faded, but its remnants remain, and I will take them. The priest watched her for a long moment, then he lifted a skeletal hand. The ground beneath them trembled, and from the heart of the temple, the last embers of the Titan's fire flickered to life. It was weak, a mere ghost of the inferno that had once blazed across the heavens, but it was still there. The priest's voice turned solemn. To claim the ashes, you must prove yourself. The fire of Helios is not given freely. It must be earned. The embers flared, twisting and shifting into shapes, into figures of molten flame. They took the form of warriors, their bodies flickering like dying stars, their weapons forged from pure light. Hera squared her shoulders, then let me be tested. The battle was unlike any she had fought before. The warriors of fire did not bleed, did not falter. They struck with the fury of a dying sun, their weapons searing the air, their very presence threatening to consume her. But Hera had walked through darkness. She had stood before the wrath of gods and titans alike. She did not falter. She wielded the eye of the storm, calling forth tempests that clashed against the fire, winds that threatened to snuff out the embers. But fire was not so easily extinguished. It adapted. It fed upon oxygen and rage, and it burned on. So she changed her tactics. Instead of fighting against the fire, she embraced it. She let it burn against her skin, let it test her, let it see that she would not be consumed. And when the flames raged their brightest, she reached into the inferno and seized the ashes. The fire roared around her, then dimmed, flickering into nothingness. When the silence returned, the priest stood watching. Then slowly he bowed. "The fire of Helios recognizes you," he murmured. "Take what you have earned." Hera looked down at her hands, where the ashes of Helios now rested, glowing faintly like dying embers. A power long thought lost, now reclaimed. She turned from the ruins, the ashes secured, and walked into the night. The seventh labor was complete, and the gods had even more reason to fear what she was becoming. The weight of the ashes of Helios pulsed in Hera's grasp as she stepped once more into the celestial halls of Olympus. The gods who had doubted her, who had whispered of her downfall, were silent now. Even Apollo, who still sat upon the throne that was not his, watched her with something bordering on wariness. She had walked the forgotten ruins of the sun, battled warriors forged from fire itself, and returned bearing the remnants of a Titan's power. Each labor they set before her, she conquered. Each test was meant to break her, but she had only become stronger. She approached the center of the hall, where the gods convened. She uncurled her fingers, letting the faintly glowing embers of Helios's remains float before them. "The seventh labor is complete," she said, her voice as steady as the mountains. Apollo's fingers tapped against the gilded armrest of his throne. "You are relentless," he murmured, his golden eyes gleaming. "But your trials are not yet finished." Hera lifted her chin. "Then tell me the eighth." The gods exchanged glances. Hermes, standing at the edge of the circle, unfurled a scroll. "Your next labor is to retrieve the veil of Nyx, the cloak of night, from the depths of the shadow veil. A hush fell over the gods. Even Poseidon, who often relished watching her struggle, frowned slightly at the task set before her. The Veil of Nyx was not just an artifact. It was a relic of the primordial goddess of night herself. It was said that whoever wielded it could shroud the heavens in eternal darkness, bending the very essence of shadow to their will. Hera's lips curled into the barest hint of a smile. Then I shall claim the night. The shadow veil lay beyond the edges of the mortal realm, a place untouched by sunlight, where even the gods hesitated to tread. It was a land shrouded in perpetual twilight, where the air was thick with whispers of things unseen, and the ground pulsed with forgotten power. Hera's arrival was met with silence. No birds, no wind. Only the oppressive stillness of a world steeped in shadow. She moved forward cautiously, her senses attuned to the shifting energies around her. Then, from the darkness, something stirred. A voice, low and melodic, curled around her. You walk in a place where even the stars fear to shine. Why have you come, Queen of the Heavens? Hera did not stop. I seek the Veil of Nyx. Laughter, like the rustling of unseen wings, echoed through the veil. And what would a daughter of the sky do with the cloak of the night? The shadows coiled before her, and from them a figure emerged. A woman tall and veiled in flowing darkness, her eyes like twin pools of infinite night. Nyx, the primordial goddess of night, the mother of dreams and terror alike. You cannot take what is not freely given. Nyx whispered, circling her. The veil does not belong to Olympus. It belongs to the void. Hera did not falter. Then I will earn it. The goddess's lips curled into something unreadable. Then you shall be tested. The ground beneath Hera trembled, and suddenly the veil shifted. She was no longer standing in the shadowed valley. Instead, she was in darkness. True, absolute darkness, a void where there was no form, no space, no time. It was not merely the absence of light. It was not merely the absence of light. It was something else entirely, a space between existence and oblivion. And she was not alone. From the void, figures began to emerge, spectral forms, wraiths cloaked in the night, their hollow eyes gleaming with malice. They were once seen but no longer existed, fragments of things that had once been but no longer existed. One stepped forward, its voice a mere whisper of wind. You seek the Veil of Nyx, but do you understand the price? Night does not bow. It devours. Hera met its gaze. I have walked through fire and storm, through ruin and the abyss. I do not seek to wield the night. I seek to master it. The wraith lifted a hand, and from the void, the shadows attacked. The battle was unlike any she had fought before. The wraiths did not strike with swords or strength. They wielded a fear, twisting the void around her, forcing her to see what she had long buried. Visions assaulted her. Zeus, standing above her, declaring her unworthy, the gods laughing as she was cast down, a world where she was nothing, forgotten, cast aside. But fear was a weapon she had learned to turn against itself. She clenched her fists, summoning every ounce of power she had gained. The fire of Prometheus burned within her. The strength of the Gorgon's heart pulsed in her veins. The eye of the storm surged with the fury of 1,000 tempests. She pushed back. The darkness recoiled, shrieking as her will cut through it like a blade. The wraiths faltered, their forms flickering, their power waning. And in the midst of them, the veil of Nyx began to take shape, a cloak woven from the very fabric of the void, swirling with the essence of night. Hera reached forward. The wraiths lunged, but it was too late. Her fingers closed around the veil. Power surged through her, cold and infinite, wrapping around her shoulders like a second skin. The darkness recognizer did not consume her, but embraced her. She had claimed the night. And when the void shattered, when the shadow veil reformed around her, Nyx stood watching. The primordial goddess inclined her head. "You are stronger than I thought." Hera adjusted the veil upon her shoulders. "I always was." Nyx's laughter was soft, knowing. "Then go, Queen of Olympus, and let them see what the night can do." Hera emerged from the shadow veil. The veil of Nyx wrapped around her like a mantle of twilight. When she returned to Olympus, the gods cheered her. Even Apollo, for the first time, looked afraid. The 8th labor was complete, and the Queen of Olympus had become something unstoppable. The veil of Nyx settled around Hera's shoulders, like the sky itself had surrendered to her will. The swirling darkness of the primordial night billowed at the edges, a cloak not just of shadow, but of power, a mantle woven from the void where light dared not tread. She had taken the night, had proven herself worthy of the domain even the gods feared to claim. And now, as she returned to Olympus, she felt their stares, their silence, their uncertainty. Apollo, for the first time since this ordeal had begun, looked uneasy upon his stolen throne. His golden light, radiant and arrogant, flickered in the presence of the unyielding night that clung to her form. The others, those who had cast their votes against her, shifted in their seats. Even Athena, who prided herself on logic and wisdom, watched with careful calculation. Hera stepped forward, unhurried, unrushed, her gaze steady as she held her place before them. "The 8th labor is complete. Tell me the 9th. It was Hermes who spoke, though for the first time his ever-present smirk had faded. He unfurled the scroll with fingers that hesitated ever so slightly. "For your 9th labor, you are to retrieve the heart of Tartarus." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Poseidon, who had relished her struggles, narrowed his gaze in something close to unease. The heart of Tartarus was no mere artifact, no relic lost to time. It was the core of the abyss itself, the very heart of the pit where the Titans were sealed away, the source of the underworld's darkest power. To touch it was to invite madness. To wield it was to claim dominion over horrors that predated the gods themselves. Zeus had never dared claim it. Hades had never sought to control it. And yet they expected her to retrieve it. Hera did not flinch. Then I shall take it. Tartarus was a place that even the dead feared to tread. Beyond the domains of Hades, past the rivers that bound the underworld, past the gates where Charon turned his boat away in mourning, the abyss stretched downward, a chasm with no bottom, no walls, no true existence. It was chaos before the world was formed, a prison where those who had once ruled the heavens had been cast into suffering beyond mortal comprehension. Hera stood at the precipice of its entrance, the last of the underworld's light dimming behind her. Ahead, there was only void, but she did not hesitate. She stepped forward and fell. There was no descent, no feeling of air rushing past. There was only nothing and then something. Tartarus did not exist in the way the mortal world did. It was not a place. Not truly. It was a will, a force, a consciousness that stretched beyond time itself. And it knew she had come. The ground materialized beneath her feet, though she had not seen it form. The darkness here was absolute, not merely the absence of light, but the consumption of it, the devouring of anything that dared exist. Then the shadows moved. They did not take form. They did not need to. They were the remnants of those who had once been gods, once been titans, now reduced to echoes in the abyss. They did not speak with voices, for their mouths had long since been lost to the void. Instead, their presence pressed against her mind, their rage, their agony, their endless hunger seeping into her thoughts. A whisper, though no sound was made. "Why do you come?" Hera stood firm. "I come for the heart of Tartarus." A second voice, layered with thousands of lost echoes, rasped, "You cannot take what is not yours." Hera's grip tightened on the veil of Nyx. "Power is not given, it is taken." The abyss trembled. The heart of Tartarus was not a thing that could be reached by foot, nor found in a hidden chamber. It existed at the center of the abyss, the pulsing core of something older than the gods. To claim it, she would have to call it to her, to demand it recognize her. She closed her eyes and willed it. The void pulsed. The shadows around her shrieked, twisting and writhing, the formless mass of lost titans surging forward. They could not strike her, not directly, but they could consume her. They could swallow her identity, reduce her to nothing, as they had done to so many before. Hera did not move. She reached deeper into the veil, deeper into the night she had taken as her own. The darkness was not her enemy, it was her ally. And then, from the depths of the abyss, something answered her call. The heart of Tartarus was not an object, not a relic to be plucked from a pedestal. It was a presence, a force, a living thing. It rose from the void, pulsing with something beyond divinity, beyond comprehension. It was neither light nor darkness. It was raw creation, the essence of what had been before the gods shaped the world. It spoke, though it had no voice. "You are not meant to wield me." Hera opened her eyes. "Then let me prove that I am." The void itself collapsed. The shadows surged forward, the abyss tearing apart, pulling at her, trying to unravel her. But Hera did not resist. She embraced it. She was not merely taking the heart, she was becoming it. For the first time, the abyss hesitated. Then it yielded. When the void settled, Hera stood at its center, the pulsing essence of the heart of Tartarus now clutched within her grasp. The abyss around her no longer sought to devour, it recognized her. She had not just claimed the darkness, she had mastered it. When she returned to Olympus, she did not walk. She arrived, the shadows coiling around her form like a storm, the veil of Nyx and the heart of Tartarus now both bound to her will. The gods did not speak, they only watched. Apollo rose from his throne, but there was no challenge in his stance, only fear. Hera stepped forward, her voice like the whisper of the abyss itself. The ninth labor is complete. The halls of Olympus trembled, and now only one labor remained. The sky above Olympus crackled with a power unseen since the dawn of time. Hera stood at the foot of the throne room, the veil of Nyx wrapped around her shoulders like the night itself, and the heart of Tartarus pulsing in her grasp. The gods, once seated in casual judgment, now sat frozen, uncertain, their gazes flickering between fear and something dangerously close to awe. She had completed 9 impossible labors, each meant to break her, to humble her, to remind her of the place they had long assigned her, but they had not broken her. They had reforged her into something greater. Apollo, his golden glow dimmed in the presence of the abyss she carried, rose from the throne he had dared to sit upon. His voice, once so confident, was quiet. "One last labor remains, Queen of Olympus." She met his gaze without hesitation. "Then speak it." Hermes stepped forward, for once devoid of his usual smirk. He unfurled the final scroll, his voice lacking its usual flourish. "Your final labor is this. You must stand before chaos itself and return." A stunned silence followed. The gods did not breathe. Even Poseidon, who had delighted in her trials, narrowed his eyes. Chaos, the primordial void, the unknowable abyss from which all things had come, was not something to be retrieved, stolen, or tamed. It was existence before form, the end and beginning of all. Hera simply nodded. "Then I shall stand before chaos." The path to chaos was no path at all. Hera stepped beyond the known universe, beyond the edge of the stars, and into the void where even the fates dared not spin their threads. There was no sky here, no ground, no time. There was only before and after, and she walked the line between them. Then she felt it. Not a being, not a force, everything and nothing. The very fabric of reality trembled at its edges. Hera did not cower. She took another step forward. and chaos noticed. The void rippled, not as an attack, not as a rejection, but as a questions. Who are you? Hera stood tall. I am Hera, Queen of Olympus. The void shifted, shapes forming and unforming, colors that had never existed burning and fading in the same breath. Queen? A whisper of laughter, of storms, of creation unraveling. Hera did not yield. I have been given tasks to humble me, to destroy me, to remind me of my place. And yet, with every challenge, I have walked through night, through death, through the forgotten corners of this world and beyond. And now I stand before you. Chaos did not answer. Chaos did not speak. It became. The universe bent. Hera felt herself pulled inward, through time, through memory. She saw Olympus before it was shaped. She saw the Titans, the war, the blood of gods spilled upon the newborn earth. She saw herself before she had been named, before she had been confined to the title of wife, mother, queen. She saw what she was meant to be. The darkness did not take her. She claimed it. With a final breath, she stepped back, and chaos let her go. When she returned to Olympus, the sky itself darkened for a moment, as if the heavens themselves recognized what had transpired. She stood before the throne, and this time, it was not Apollo who rose to meet her. It was Zeus. The true king of Olympus had returned, and though his powers still surged like the storm, he hesitated. He looked at her, not as the wife he had dismissed, not as the queen they had attempted to subdue, but as something more. You have done the impossible, he said at last. Hera met his gaze, and for the first time in eternity, she smiled. No, Zeus, I have done what I was always capable of. You simply refused to see it. The gods watched, uncertain, waiting. Then, without another word, Zeus knelt. One by one, the gods followed. Hera, Queen of Olympus, had not just reclaimed her throne. She had remade the heavens in her own image. The final labor was complete, and Olympus would never be the same. And so, dear listeners, our journey comes to an end. The gods have spoken, the fates have woven their threads, and another legend has been carved into eternity. But the magic does not end here. There are always more stories to tell, more myths to unravel, and I would love for you to join me again. If you enjoyed this tale, follow along so you won't miss the next journey into the world of mythology. I was Abigail, and I was honored to accompany you on this adventure tonight. May your dreams be filled with stories as wondrous as the one we shared. Sleep well, and until next time, sweet dreams.